medical narcissists. I explained to you that there are certain professions, certain areas that are particularly attractive to our kind. As you should know by now, the narcissist is governed by either the subconscious or aware pursuit of the prime aims, controlling people, drawing fuel from them, acquiring their character traits and also their residual benefits, and certain environments cater to those things far better than others. The entertainment industry, for instance, is a big one. Films, pop stars, authors. Vast reach can be afforded many people to control and be controlled by star power. Huge amounts of fuel to be drawn, character traits galore to acquire, and so many delicious residual benefits. There are other fields, other professions. Law enforcement, the law, and of course, medicine. And by way of introduction to this, I'm going to provide to you the perspective of a trauma and orthopedic surgeon, exhibiting many of the behaviours which denote how many narcissists and narcissistic behaviours are prevalent within this field, but once again demonstrating how so many people miss what is actually going on. One of Roshana Medhian-Staffel's earliest memories is of sitting on the worktop in the kitchen watching her father carve a leg of lamb. He put his surgical gloves on and showed me how to take out all the sinews and fat, so we were left with completely lean fillets. It was like elegant butchery. She grew up surrounded by scalpels and stethoscopes. Both her parents were doctors who had come to Britain from Iran, and as a child she travelled all over the country with them to different hospitals as they moved jobs. Her first ambition was to be a Formula One mechanic, but one day she went to watch her dad doing an operation and realised it was a bit like a pit stop, so she applied to medical school. From the first day, I knew I wanted to be a surgeon, she says. It never crossed her mind that anyone would ever think that, because she was a girl, she might be less able than her older brother. But over the 12 years that she has been training as a trauma and orthopedic surgeon, she has experienced misogyny, discrimination, and sexual harassment. There's a boys' club mentality in surgery, she says. At the start, people often underestimated me. They would look at me and say, "You're not one of us." I decided I'd have to turn it into an advantage. If their expectations were low, then I'd have to blow them away. Medea Staffel, 37, is part of a new generation of female surgeons who are challenging the male-dominated culture in the profession. With 2 boys, aged 3 and 4, her North London home is overflowing with toys as well as piled high with the books that she's studying every evening for her next set of examinations. It's clear that she loves her job. My aim is not just to be a surgeon, it's to be a damn good one. I didn't go into it to be average, she says as she pours tea. But she's also exhausted and demoralised. The sexism comes from patients as well as other members of staff. People will assume you're a nurse. I previously worked in departments where the guys all went off to golf, and men were prioritised for opportunities over women. Sometimes, as female surgeons, we feel as if we have to work twice as hard. She says many of her most recent male colleagues have been supportive, but there is a systemic problem. Even the surgical instruments are made for male hands. Traditionally, surgeons are known as Mr. rather than the doctor, but women often get called by their first name. Once, when Medea Staffel told a consultant that she wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon, he looked her up and down and said, "What's your plan B?" I suppose I didn't look like your average orthopedic wannabe. I dressed quite nicely, my hair was perfectly done, and I had my makeup on. But that doesn't mean I can't be a great surgeon, she says. It was so patronising. I said I don't need a plan B and walked off. Another male doctor suggested to her that full-time surgery was not an appropriate career choice for mothers. There have been darker moments. I've been sexually harassed lots of times, she says. One surgeon in medical school made me feel extremely uncomfortable. He kept calling me to his office under this guise of having philosophical conversations, potentially being hoovered, of course. He'd say things like, I can read everyone, but I can't read you. He'd insist I should go in his car to a satellite clinic, then put his hand on my thigh. Poor boundary recognition. It was really creepy. I remember on my last day there, I got a message from him saying, "I want to say goodbye before you go. I'm coming to your accommodation." I was so terrified that I threw everything into a bag and ran out. I had nightmares about it for years. That was not an isolated incident. During her time as a junior doctor, she says, I've had people come into the sluice room, where waste is disposed of, and stand behind me and grind themselves on me. Lack of boundary recognition, absence of emotional empathy, sense of entitlement. Provocation. There was one time when someone walked in and said, "You've got your short trousers on. Make sure you always wear them because your ankles are really sexy." Demeaning, belittlement, invalidation. I know so many people who have had similar experiences. Medea and Staffel has persuaded the surgical instrument manufacturers to review their equipment to make it more female-friendly, and, as chairwoman of the Healthcare Workers Foundation, is working for better conditions for NHS staff. There is, however, a long way to go. More than half of medical students are women, but only 15% of consultant surgeons in England are female, and in some specialisms the percentage is much lower. Fewer than 8% of orthopaedic surgeons are women. We're known in medicine as the jocks or the meatheads. Historically, it was the big rugby players who went into orthopaedics, Medea and Staffel says. I'd never met any female orthopaedic surgeons with families when I started my career, so I said, if no one's done it, then I'll be the first. That's been my motto throughout. I'm going to do it my way. She's paid a price. Surgical training involves long hours and unpredictability. At one point, Medea and Staffel was paying more than £4,000 a month on childcare. I was basically working for nothing. My husband and I said we just had to see it as an investment. Now she spends 4 hours a day travelling to and from her hospital, leaving before 6 a.m. and often not getting home until 8 p.m. Surgery is horrific for working mothers, she says. There is a saying, knife before wife, and the whole profession was designed around the idea that a surgeon is a man with a wife at home to look after the family. I don't feel that system has changed much. To qualify as a surgeon takes a minimum of 15 years, including at least 6 years in specialty training where the hours are regular. Trainees rotate around different hospitals every year to build up expertise and often have little control over whether they are posted. Flexible working is frowned upon and sometimes impossible. Going part-time means it takes even longer to qualify. Many doctors delay having children so that they will be taken seriously at work and then struggle to conceive. She reads me messages on her WhatsApp group for female surgeons. There are dozens of women who are saving lives every day but finding it almost impossible to cope with the amount of juggling that is required. One says at every stage there is double jeopardy as a female trainee. Work harder, earn less, and the physical anguish of babies and attempted babies. I love my job, but I do feel the job has not loved me. Another describes low-grade, toxic, unconscious bias throughout training. Fiona Mint, the Vice President of the Royal College and a consultant at the Royal Free Hospital in London, explains that more than 50% of female surgeons have experienced harassment or abuse. Lack of emotional empathy, sense of entitlement, lack of boundary recognition. Now, it's important to point out that not all of the individuals engaging in this behaviour will be narcissists, but there will be many amongst them. The reason being is that the environment itself is one which is particularly attractive to a narcissist. The idea that with your intellect in your hands, you cure someone's ills, in some instances save somebody's lives. It's for no reason, of course, that reference is often made in medical fields to the concept of the God complex. This is just an extension of the way that a narcissist would see themselves as superior to everybody else, that they would be the leading surgeon. And with that, of course, there would be contempt for those that are less able, because at the end of the day, most surgeons, bar some notable exceptions, are actually very, very good at what they do. And those that are narcissists are driven to utilise that actual talent in a way which helps them get to the prime aims. Recognition, being known as a superb surgeon, that swagger and confidence which has both patients and colleagues swoon over them, which can easily then translate into hoovering an individual and sexually harassing them based upon this person's not going to say anything because the organisation will never dare do anything against me because I'm so good at what I do. That arrogance, of course, manifesting. The fact that the individual sees that person as an object, that they should appreciate me, that they should do what I want. After all, I'm Mr. Scissors, the best surgeon in this environment. The worship that comes from colleagues who are in awe of that particular individual's expertise and, of course, grateful and entirely appreciative patients. It's little wonder that the medical environment caters to the narcissist. People can easily be controlled through the inherent skill that the narcissist has, fuel gushing from all those around, colleagues, patients, administrators, the general public, the money that can be earned through both state and private practice. You don't meet many poor surgeons. The ability to fix their own schedules as a consequence of their abilities, and it's little wonder that such an environment is so attractive. There's also, of course, the lack of accountability in terms of, I would never do anything wrong, you're the layperson, you know fuck all. And therefore many people where mistakes do occur, and they do occur, find them being covered up. That individuals within this environment find themselves being bullied into silence because the narcissist will not let them speak out about their malpractices, whether those malpractices are feeling up their colleagues, or leaving items inside people as a joke when they sew them up, or carving their initials, as some surgeons have done in relation to patients that they've had. Naturally, of course, there are many that work within the medical field that work extremely hard, and that also includes narcissists. Driven by that need to assert control and draw that fuel, the narcissism ensures that they go beyond and above the call of duty to stand out, to be heralded as that person who saved their life. The fact that there's the narcissist that doesn't want anybody to blot their copybook in terms of they've saved every single patient that has come through the doors of accident and emergency or the emergency room, and therefore they strive doing their level best to prevent that person from dying. It, of course, has positive upsides, but it also means that an environment is created whereby other individuals, and as this article has been explaining, particularly men, feel obliged through herd mentality to fit in and go with the flow, that they engage in inappropriate chat, inappropriate behaviours, even though they're not narcissists themselves. The prevailing environment, the prevailing attitude, is one which diminishes their emotional empathy. Of course, such individuals may also have preconceived notions about who should be undertaking these jobs, which therefore diminishes their emotional empathy towards women. A 2021 article in the Royal College's Bulletin raised the uncomfortable truth that surgery and surgical training have a problem with sexual harassment, sexual assault, and rape. Philippa Jackson, a consultant plastic surgeon in Bristol, in England, shocked the medical establishment by writing a letter in reply detailing the sexual assault she had suffered outside an operating theatre. Her account prompted a flurry of other claims in what was described as surgery's #MeToo movement. But she feels that nothing has changed. The journalist speaks to Jackson on the phone and she calmly describes her experience at the hands of a male colleague. They were discussing the patient who was about to arrive for surgery when he moved in to give her a hug. Assertion of control, absence of boundary recognition. He made some noises and rubbed up himself against me, and then as he backed away he said, "You probably felt my erection then." And he also told me he could see down my top. Provocation, belittlement, lack of boundary recognition. The encounter seemed so at odds with the sterile clinical setting of the hospital that she wondered whether she'd somehow misunderstood. I didn't make a fuss because we were about to go into theatre, and I don't think I had properly registered what had happened. I think as women we spend a lot of the time giving people the benefit of the doubt and assuming we've made a mistake in the way that we've interpreted things. This may well, of course, be the presence of emotional thinking. I thought, that's creepy, but it didn't mean I couldn't do my job, so I did what I had to do. Later that evening, she was back in theatre with the same colleague for an emergency operation. This time his behaviour was even more overt. When you put on your gown, you need somebody to tie it behind you. People often do it automatically, Jackson explains. He came up behind me in the scrub room, which was just around the corner from the operating theatres, so nobody could see us, and he said, "Can I tie you up?" I said yes, because again we need to get on with the case. I couldn't be fussy about who tied my gown. Then he said, "Now you've given me permission to tie you up under any circumstances." Sense of entitlement, misinterpretation of permission. And he kissed me on my neck from behind, lack of boundary recognition. We were just going into an emergency operation, so I went and got on with that. An operating theatre is quite an intimidating environment anyway. What was I going to say? He tied my gown and I didn't like it. You feel trapped in the circumstances. I don't think any of us really wants to believe that we're vulnerable. A few days later I was talking to the theatre nurse about what happened, and she said, "That's not okay." Eventually Jackson wrote a letter to the hospital detailing what had happened. The person she had taken it to said, "Do you want me to have an informal chat with him, or do you want this to go down the formal route?" She inferred that the informal route might be more appropriate, Jackson recalls, fearful that if the man was not confronted about his behaviour, he'd do it again. She pushed for an inquiry, but nothing happened. They did an investigation which was quite superficial. The questions to me were very much focused on, did you say no? Did you push him away? Did anyone see it? You're made to feel it's your fault. In the end they said, nobody saw it, we can't prove that it happened, therefore we can't do anything about it. The man was not suspended, and shortly after Jackson left the hospital for another job. You survive, then move on to the next place, and hope it doesn't happen again. Looking back, the warning signs were there. I think the person who assaulted me is probably predatory. When I look at his behaviour over the preceding months, he had been escalating in physical contact with me, and I do wonder what would have happened next if I hadn't spoken to someone about it, because he was getting bolder and bolder. His behaviour was known about and nobody chose to act. Again, it's highly likely this individual was a narcissist, exhibiting this predatory behaviour, which was going on over a sustained period of time, but nobody sees it as such. Jackson also worries about the consequences for patients as well as staff. It's absolutely devastating because people put their lives in our hands, she said. They trust us at their most vulnerable moments, and there are people out there taking advantage. Of the man who assaulted her, she says, how many times has he behaved like that in front of a patient or to a patient, either when nobody else has been watching or when they have and they let it slide? I've been a patient, and it frightens me now to think what's happening when I'm unconscious, because not everyone there is good with good intentions. She's witnessed some shocking behaviour around patients under general anaesthetic. I've been there when people have commented, I don't know why she wouldn't have shaved for us, in reference to a woman's pubic hair. There are a lot of inappropriate comments. Now I'm a consultant, I'm much more protected, and it's easy for me to say, okay, you can't make those jokes, those comments aren't allowed. But it happens all the time. Only last month, James White, a doctor who repeatedly sent explicit photos of himself to fellow medical students, hoovering, sense of entitlement, lack of boundary recognition, escaped being struck off. There are so many stories, but nothing changes. Jackson says, I feel like we're in a holding pattern. We have to keep pushing, but I look at the review of the Metropolitan Police, which came as a result of someone being murdered by a police officer who was known to be a sexual predator. And I wonder what has to happen in the NHS for us to get a root and branch overhaul of the organisation. We've created a permissive environment that is tolerant of people who are predators. It's like giving the wolf the sheep's clothing. We are effectively saying, you can walk among us and no one will know because we all wear the same clothes. And if they're prepared to do this to colleagues, what do they do to patients? The journalist also speaks to Victoria Pegner. She's completing her training as a colorectal surgeon, and she explained that culturally, within surgery, you're not an alpha male, see the video about alpha males, if you give equal priority to your kids. She explained that men largely wrote off surgery as being male-dominated because women couldn't hack the long and unpredictable hours. But I don't believe that's what it is. Midwifery and obstetrics are female-dominated, and they're horrific hours. I absolutely believe it's the culture. What happens is, you're in an orthopaedic theatre and you're a Muslim hijab-wearing female junior doctor, someone goes to you, oh, the terrorist just walked in. Insult. Or they say, hello, crumpet, looking hot. Lack of boundary recognition, flattery. Or you walk in and no one acknowledges you. They ignore you and they carry on talking about their sexual encounters. Those are real examples. It still goes on. Recently, she met one of the United Kingdom's most famous surgeons. He said, you're the type of woman I really want to know intimately. You're not one to miss. Lack of boundary recognition, provocation. He went on and on. It was awful, but I didn't know what to do with it. I can't piss him off because he's powerful. Her way of coping as a trainee surgeon was, she says, to be one of the lads. I play rugby, I'm really sporty, I like banter. I thought that was the way to get through this without being offended. These are just some of the experiences of female surgeons in an environment which you can tell is one which is dominated by narcissists, but also one where narcissists create an environment which, through herd mentality, creates an unpleasant atmosphere. Now, what is interesting, of course, is that some of the comments to this article demonstrate once again that people fail to see what's actually going on. One individual wrote, "There's no place for misogyny, and no acceptable place for sexual assault of the types described in this article. What makes this worse is that the perpetrators are highly intelligent, socially integrated, and well-regarded members of our societal elite." Indeed, of course, that gives plausible deniability to those where they might be confronted, but it shows the fact that this individual fails to realise that amongst that societal elite, amongst those well-educated individuals, there walks our kind. Another states, "There is a hard-drinking culture that seems to normalise this behaviour. The army, the Red Arrows, submarines, fire service, the police. It sounds like the culture is wrong in all our institutions. The common features are the systematic complicity and failure to take action to weed these weirdos out." Of course, what this person is identifying as weirdos is covering both narcissists and those individuals who were influenced by the prevailing atmosphere and environment. Once again, all of the comments, and there were many about this article, failed to recognise the presence of narcissists and the impact of narcissists upon these environments. The medical narcissist is highly prevalent, and there will be far more who are narcissists than in other professions. The number of narcissists will be overrepresented amongst the medical profession for the reasons, some of which I touched upon earlier in this video. It also provides you with the impact that it has upon some of these victims as they have described their situation, albeit, of course, the article was looking at it in a male-female divide, whereas what they would be better to look at is that it isn't actually driven by gender, but it's actually driven by the nature of the person that then impacts upon other people, both in terms of the creation of an environment and also the behaviour towards the relevant victims. It also is demonstrative of the fact that, once again, the individuals use terms such as alpha males, predators, but they fail to actually understand what those individuals truly are, and shows that the continuing education to understand that our kind function and operate and fit in, but behave in the manners that have been described, is something that needs to be looked at in greater detail. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.